3 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Confederation as probationary members, and Colonel Danny Wright had never expected to receive the message that changed everything. The communication came directly from the Confederation. High Command requesting immediate military assistance against something called the Devourers. Danny read the message 3 times before he believed what he was seeing, because the peaceful aliens had never asked for military help from anyone. The briefing took place on Serenity Station, where Ambassador Rick Stone explained the situation to Danny and his officers. The Devourers were machine intelligences that had appeared at the edge of galactic space 6 months ago and had already consumed 3 entire star systems. They turned planets into raw materials and converted all life into energy to feed their endless hunger. The aliens had tried negotiation and diplomacy and peaceful solutions, but the machines only responded with more destruction. Danny studied the tactical reports while his aide Captain Amy Rodriguez prepared deployment orders for their ships. The alien military strategies all focused on evacuation and defensive positions with no consideration for offensive operations. Every battle plan involved retreating to safe positions and hoping the enemy would eventually stop advancing. Danny found himself frustrated by military thinking that seemed designed to lose wars slowly, instead of winning them quickly. The Confederation fleet was massive and technologically advanced, but had never been used for actual combat. Admiral Karen Hayes had spent months training with alien commanders who understood fleet movements and logistics, but had no experience with battle tactics or strategy. The aliens treated war like a natural disaster that had to be endured, rather than an enemy that could be defeated through superior force and planning. Rick Stone warned Danny that the aliens were expecting human forces to follow Confederation military protocols which emphasized minimizing casualties and avoiding unnecessary destruction. The ambassador explained that most species in the galaxy considered aggressive tactics to be signs of primitive thinking, and that humans would need to be careful not to shock their allies with overly violent behavior. The first engagement took place at Kepler's Edge, where a Devourer scout force was advancing toward a populated system. Danny deployed 3 destroyers under Amy's command, with orders to delay the enemy advance while civilian evacuations continued. The alien observers expected a fighting retreat that would buy time for their slow diplomatic solutions to somehow work against emotionless machines. Amy positioned the UES Defiance between the Devourers and the evacuation ships, while her sister vessels flanked the enemy formation. The aliens watched in confusion as the human ships moved toward the enemy instead of away from them. When the battle began, Amy ordered ramming speed against the lead Devourer vessel, and her crew responded with cheers that could be heard over the ship's communication system. The collision destroyed both ships but gave Lieutenant Ben Parker's boarding parties access to 2 more enemy vessels through the debris field. Ben led his Marines through twisted metal and vacuum using magnetic boots and plasma torches to cut their way into Devourer command centers. The alien observers watched in horror as humans fought room to room against machines in conditions that should have been impossible for organic beings to survive. Dr. Claire Thompson monitored the human forces from the medical bay and noticed something that amazed and terrified her alien colleagues. Human heart rates and brain activity increased during combat in ways that improved rather than hindered their performance. Where other species showed stress responses that reduced their effectiveness, humans seemed to become stronger and faster, and more focused when faced with mortal danger. Ben's boarding party captured intact Devourer technology by fighting through 3 decks of automated defenses. The Marines used improvised weapons and creative tactics that the machines had not been programmed to counter. When ammunition ran low, they switched to hand tools, and when those broke, they used pieces of the enemy ships themselves as clubs and spears. The aliens watched humans laugh and joke while fighting for their lives in ways that made no sense to peaceful minds. The battle lasted 18 hours and ended with complete human victory against odds that should have guaranteed defeat. Amy's fleet destroyed or captured every enemy vessel while taking casualties that would have broken the morale of any other species. Instead, the humans seemed energized by their losses and fought harder as the battle became more desperate and dangerous. The alien fleet commanders requested detailed after-action reports that they studied with growing concern. Human tactics involved acceptable losses and calculated risks and aggressive maneuvers that prioritized victory over survival. Where alien strategies focused on preserving life, human plans seemed designed to trade lives for strategic advantages in ways that produced better overall results at terrible personal cost. Danny received congratulations from Confederation leadership, along with requests for more human forces to join the war effort. The aliens had discovered that humans could accomplish in hours what their own forces needed weeks to achieve. But the victory reports also included disturbing observations about human behavior under stress that made several species reconsider their alliance with Earth. The Vorthak delegation expressed concern about human psychological profiles that showed increased happiness and excitement during combat situations. Zexthera personally contacted Rick Stone to ask if humans were actually enjoying warfare in ways that other species found incomprehensible. The ambassador tried to explain that humans had evolved as persistence hunters, but his explanations only made the aliens more worried about what they had welcomed into their peaceful civilization. Captain Troy Miller received orders to join Danny's expanding force along with additional destroyers and support vessels. The human fleet was growing as more species requested their assistance against Devourer advances. Troy found himself commanding mixed crews of humans and aliens who had very different ideas about acceptable risk and tactical thinking. The aliens were amazed by human technical improvisation and creative problem-solving, but disturbed by the casual way humans discuss death and injury. Where other species treated casualties as tragedies, humans seemed to view them as necessary costs of achieving objectives. The difference in perspective created tension between human and alien crews, who were fighting the same enemy for very different reasons. Major Susan Kelly's ground forces joined the campaign when Devourer machines began landing on populated worlds. Susan's tactics involved urban warfare and guerrilla operations that the aliens found effective, but morally questionable. Her troops would use civilian areas as cover and turn peaceful cities into battlefields, without seeming to consider the psychological impact on non-combatant populations. The liberation of Harmony Prime became a turning point in galactic perception of human capabilities. Susan's Marines cleared the planet of Devourer forces in 72 hours using tactics that the aliens described as brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. The human soldiers sang war songs while clearing buildings and treated the dangerous mission like an exciting game that they were determined to win. Danny found himself caught between alien expectations and human nature as his forces continued to achieve impossible victories through methods that shocked their allies. The Confederation had asked for military assistance and humanity was providing exactly what was needed to win the war. But winning was requiring humans to be themselves in ways that revealed aspects of human nature that the peaceful galaxy was not prepared to understand or accept. The war against the Devourers was being won, but the cost was becoming clear to both sides. Humanity was proving itself to be everything the galaxy needed to survive, and everything the galaxy feared about the dark spaces between stars where predators waited for their chance to hunt. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the strange ship approach through the darkness of space. The vessel looked like it was made of crystal and light with curves that bent in ways that hurt his eyes to follow. His crew had been exploring this sector for 3 months without finding any signs of intelligent life, and now here was proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. The communication officer turned to Jake with wide eyes. She held her headset with shaking hands and spoke in a whisper that somehow felt too loud for the moment. The aliens were trying to talk to them using radio waves and mathematics, and somehow they already knew human languages. Jake felt his heart racing as he realized this was the most important moment in human history. Commander Lisa Barnes moved to stand beside him as the alien ship came close enough to see clearly. The thing was beautiful in a way that made no sense to human minds, with patterns of light moving across its surface like living art. Lisa had spent her whole career studying life on other worlds, but she had never imagined anything like this. She pressed her face against the viewing port and watched the ship dance through space without any visible engines or thrust. The alien voice came through the speakers with a sound like music mixed with the ringing of bells. It spoke perfect English, but with an accent that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The being introduced itself as Zexthera of the Vorthak people, and said it was honored to meet the children of Earth. Jake felt a chill run down his spine at how the aliens spoke about humans like it already knew everything about them. Dr. Alan Foster joined them at the viewing port with his medical scanner in hand, trying to get readings on the alien ship. The device showed patterns of energy that made no sense according to human science. Alan had studied alien biology for years based on theories and guesses, but now he was looking at real alien technology that worked in ways no human had ever imagined. He watched his scanner display numbers that changed faster than he could read them. Zexthera explained that the Vorthak were part of something called the Galactic Confederation, which was made up of 12 different species that had lived in peace for over 1,000 years. The aliens spoke about their civilization with a joy that Jake found infectious, but also somehow sad. Zexthara described worlds where different species worked together to build cities of light and gardens that stretched across entire planets. Lisa asked about human history, and Jake felt his stomach drop as Zexthara began to list events from Earth with perfect accuracy. The alien knew about human wars and violence and disease and seemed confused about why humans had spent so much time fighting each other. Zexthara spoke about human conflicts like they were puzzles that needed to be solved, rather than terrible parts of history that humans tried to forget. The first meeting took place on neutral ground in the space between the two ships. Jake wore his best uniform and brought Lisa and Alan with him as they traveled in a small shuttle to meet the alien face to face. The Vorthak ship opened like a flower and welcomed them into chambers filled with light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Zexthera stood 7 feet tall and looked like a person made of living crystal with facets that caught light and threw rainbows across the room. The alien moved with grace that made human dancers look clumsy, and spoke with a voice that made everything sound like poetry. Jake found himself staring at the being and trying to understand how something so beautiful could be real. The cultural exchange began with simple things like sharing food and music and art. The aliens were fascinated by human creativity and the way humans could imagine things that did not exist and then make them real. Zexthera examined human tools and weapons with the curiosity of a child discovering new toys. The alien asked questions about human biology that made Alan uncomfortable, because they focused on things like teeth and muscle structure. Jake noticed that Zexthera seemed disturbed when Lisa showed pictures of human history. The alien stared at images of battlefields and armies with an expression that looked like fear mixed with sadness. Zexthera asked why humans had developed weapons designed to kill other humans and seemed unable to understand the concept of war between members of the same species. Alan conducted medical scans of Zexthera with the alien's permission and discovered that the Vorthak had no natural weapons and no instincts for violence. Their entire biology was designed for cooperation and peace. When Alan explained that humans were omnivores who had evolved from hunters, the alien became very quiet and asked many questions about what it meant to be a predator species. The meeting ended with Zexthera inviting humanity to visit the Confederation capital and apply for membership in their galactic community. The alien spoke about the wonderful things humans could contribute to their peaceful civilization and the technologies they could share. Jake felt excited about the possibilities, but also worried about what the aliens would think when they learned more about human nature. As the horizon traveled toward Confederation space, Jake found himself thinking about the expression on Zexthera's face when the alien had learned about human hunting instincts. The Vorthak had seemed fascinated and terrified, at the same time like someone discovering that their new friend was a sleeping dragon. Jake wondered if humanity was ready to meet a galaxy full of beings who had never known war and had no understanding of violence. Lisa spent the journey studying everything the aliens had shared about their civilization and found herself amazed by what they had accomplished. 12 species living in perfect harmony for 1,000 years without a single war or major conflict. Cities built in cooperation where every being worked together for the common good. It sounded like paradise, but also made her wonder how such gentle beings had survived in a universe that seemed hostile to life. Alan reviewed his scans of Zexthera and realized that every species in the Confederation was probably similar to the Vorthak in their peaceful nature. Beings who had evolved without predators and without the need to compete for resources. He began to understand why the aliens had seemed so confused by human history, and wondered what would happen when they met humans who still carried the instincts of ancient hunters in their genes. The journey to Confederation space would take 2 weeks, and Jake knew that when they arrived, humanity would either find its place among the stars or discover that some bridges were too dangerous to cross. He looked out at the alien ship escorting them through space and hoped that the galaxy was ready to meet the children of Earth. The phrase started as whispered gratitude in the medical stations where alien survivors spoke about their human rescuers, but within months, it had spread across the galaxy like a virus of fear. Fighting like humans became the new way to describe combat that went beyond normal understanding of warfare into something that peaceful species could not comprehend or control. Captain Troy Miller had become a legend without trying or wanting the fame that followed his unit across Confederation space. The Battle of Proxima 7 was supposed to be a simple evacuation mission, but when Devourer forces cut off the escape, Roots Troy's people had fought for 72 hours straight without rest or relief. The alien observers recorded everything, and their reports made Troy sound like something from their oldest nightmares. Major Susan Kelly found herself explaining human behavior to alien psychologists who wanted to understand how her soldiers could sing while fighting through buildings filled with enemy machines. The aliens played recordings of human voices raised in harmony as plasma fire lit the darkness around them. Susan tried to explain that humans sang to keep rhythm and maintain morale, but the aliens heard something else in those voices that made them afraid. The rescued civilians from Proxima 7 told stories that grew stranger with each retelling about humans who laughed when they should have screamed and smiled when they should have cried. The alien survivors described watching human soldiers treat mortal combat like a competitive sport with winners and losers instead of a tragedy that destroyed lives and families. Dr. Claire Thompson published her research on human stress response and accidentally created the most terrifying document in galactic history. Her medical studies proved that humans were the only known species whose biology actually improved under combat conditions. While other beings suffered reduced performance and psychological trauma from violence, humans became faster and stronger, and more intelligent when their lives were threatened. Commander Tyler Brooks volunteered his crew for what everyone knew was a suicide mission against the Devourer factory ship that was building new machines faster than the Confederation could destroy them. The alien command expected noble sacrifice and heroic death, but Tyler treated the impossible mission like an interesting puzzle that needed creative solutions. The UES Vengeance approached the factory ship through a debris field that should have shredded any vessel attempting passage. Tyler's crew used the wreckage as cover and turned the dangerous environment into an advantage by navigating through spaces too tight for enemy sensors to track. The aliens watched humans fly their ship like fighter pilots instead of naval officers, treating the massive destroyer like a personal weapon. Lieutenant Ben Parker's boarding teams had developed new techniques for ship-to-ship combat that the aliens found both effective and disturbing. His Marines would breach enemy hulls and fight through corridors while the ships were still maneuvering in battle. Other species considered this impossible because the acceleration forces should have crushed anyone trying to move inside a ship during combat. But humans adapted their tactics to work with physics instead of against it. The factory ship operation became a textbook example of human military thinking when Tyler's crew not only survived their suicide mission, but captured the entire facility intact. They accomplished this by doing something no other species had attempted, which was boarding an active construction facility while it was building war machines and turning the automated systems against the Devourers themselves. Senator Mary Johnson found herself defending human actions to the Confederation Council, while privately wondering if her own people had become something she no longer recognized. The alien representatives asked questions about human psychology and culture that Mary could not answer, because she had never thought about why humans found excitement in dangerous situations or took pride in overcoming impossible odds. The Vorthak delegation presented evidence of what they called human psychological abnormalities, including recordings of human soldiers making jokes about death and treating injuries like temporary inconveniences. Zexthara played audio of human laughter during firefights and asked Mary to explain why her species found humor in situations that traumatized every other known form of intelligent life. General Orthmak of the Confederation Defense Force issued new protocols specifically designed to contain human military units after reviewing tactical reports that described human behavior as unpredictable and potentially dangerous to Allied forces. The protocols required alien oversight of all human operations and prohibited humans from making independent strategic decisions. Admiral Karen Hayes received the new restrictions with anger that surprised her alien counterparts, who expected humans to accept reasonable limitations on their military freedom. Karen's response included detailed analysis of human contributions to the war effort and pointed out that restricting human tactics would likely result in Confederation defeat and the extinction of all peaceful species in the galaxy. Captain Amy Rodriguez discovered that her reputation had spread beyond military circles when civilian populations requested human protection specifically by name. The aliens wanted human defenders but were afraid of what human protection might cost in terms of collateral damage and cultural contamination. Amy found herself caught between being needed and being feared by the same people. The situation reached a crisis point when the Harmony Thick delegation formally requested that humanity be expelled from the Confederation before their violent nature corrupted other species. The Harmony Thick were natural empaths who claimed that proximity to humans was causing psychological damage to their entire population through exposure to human emotional patterns. Ambassador Rick Stone attended emergency sessions where alien representatives discussed the human problem with language that made it clear they were debating whether humanity should be classified as a beneficial ally or a dangerous infection. Rick listened to species who owed their survival to human sacrifice describe his people as a threat to galactic civilization. The debate centered on whether human effectiveness in warfare was worth the risk of exposing peaceful species to human methods and psychology. Several delegations argued that humanity's capacity for violence made them unsuitable for membership in a civilization based on cooperation and non-aggression. Others pointed out that without human protection, the Devourers would have already consumed half the galaxy. Dr. Matt Turner's psychological evaluation of human military personnel became evidence in the proceedings when alien analysts used his research to argue that humans were fundamentally incompatible with peaceful coexistence. The report concluded that humanity was an apex predator species that had developed civilization as a tool for organized hunting rather than as an alternative to violence. The final testimony came from survivors of human rescue operations who described their mixed feelings of gratitude and terror when describing their encounters with human soldiers. The aliens spoke about being saved by beings who treated warfare like entertainment and who seemed to become happier as situations became more dangerous and hopeless. Troy Miller received orders to stand down his forces while the Confederation Council voted on humanity's future in galactic civilization. His ships waited in orbit around dead worlds that humans had liberated, while alien bureaucrats debated whether the cure was worse than the disease. Troy watched his crew maintain their equipment and prepare for missions that might never come if politics decided that peace was more important than survival. The vote was scheduled for the next morning, and Rick Stone spent the night preparing arguments that might convince peaceful beings that sometimes predators were exactly what civilization needed to survive in a universe that did not care about the difference between aggressor and victim. He knew that humanity stood trial not for failing to be civilized, but for being too good at the kind of civilization that actually worked when nightmare machines came hunting in the dark. The vote was closer than anyone expected, but the result was final, and humanity found itself formally expelled from the Galactic Confederation by a margin of 7 species to 5. Admiral Steve Watson received the news while standing on the bridge of humanity's newest carrier, watching Confederation ships maintain careful distance from human vessels as if violence might be contagious. Ambassador Julie Roberts delivered humanity's formal response to the Council with words that had been chosen carefully to avoid threats while making the consequences of separation perfectly clear. She pointed out that removing human forces from galactic defense would leave peaceful species vulnerable to threats they had no experience fighting. The aliens listened with expressions that mixed relief with growing concern about what they had just decided to lose. The Confederation discovered within days that expelling humanity from their organization did not make human influence disappear from galactic affairs. Human-trained alien units continued using human tactics because those methods produced results that traditional approaches could not achieve. Alien officers who had served alongside humans found themselves unable to return to defensive strategies. that guaranteed slow defeat instead of quick victory. Captain Scott Evans established the first independent human colony on New Arizona, a world that the Confederation had classified as uninhabitable, due to extreme gravity and radiation levels that would kill most alien species within hours. Scott's colonists not only survived but thrived in conditions that peaceful beings considered impossible for complex life. The aliens watched humans settle death worlds like they were vacation destinations. Colonel Ashley Green received warning that 3 species had secretly formed an alliance to eliminate humanity. Before human expansion could threaten galactic peace, the intelligence came from alien friends who risked their own safety to warn humans about the coming attack. Ashley prepared her defenses while wondering how beings who claimed to value peace could justify genocide as a solution to their fear. The Whisper War began with coordinated strikes against human colonies that the attackers expected to end human expansion permanently. The Alien Alliance had studied human military capabilities and designed their campaign to overwhelm human defenses. Through superior numbers and technology, they planned to present the galaxy with human extinction as an accomplished fact that could not be reversed. Ashley's defense of New Arizona became the defining moment of the conflict when her outnumbered garrison faced invasion by 3 different alien fleets simultaneously. The battle plan called for human evacuation and alien occupation, but Ashley had different ideas about how the engagement should develop. Her response turned what the aliens planned as humanity's final defeat into a demonstration of why fearing humans was justified. The civilian population of New Arizona reacted to invasion warnings with excitement rather than panic as human families loaded weapons and prepared to defend their homes. The alien invaders expected terrified refugees fleeing toward evacuation ships, but instead found organized resistance from every human on the planet, including children who treated alien soldiers like targets in a training exercise. Human children helped coordinate defensive positions using games and competitions that the aliens could not understand or predict. Kids who should have been crying with fear instead laughed while spotting enemy movements and relaying tactical information to adult defenders. The alien forces found themselves fighting an entire population that seemed to view warfare as entertainment. Ashley's garrison fought with tactics that shocked even human observers, as her soldiers used civilian buildings and infrastructure as weapons against the invading forces. The defenders turned hospitals into fortified positions and schools into ammunition depots, while maintaining cheerful attitudes that suggested they were enjoying the challenge of being outnumbered 50-1. The siege lasted 18 hours, before the Alien Alliance retreated with casualties that exceeded their worst-case projections for the entire campaign. Ashley's forces had not only survived the attack, but captured enough enemy equipment to outfit 3 additional human regiments. The victory margin was so overwhelming that neutral species began reconsidering their assumptions about human military capabilities. Ambassador Greg Campbell delivered humanity's response to the Confederation's demand for human withdrawal from all disputed territories. His speech became known as the Mirror Declaration, because he pointed out that humanity had not chosen to become the galaxy's nightmare, but had simply revealed what nightmares looked like to beings who had forgotten that the universe contained predators. Greg's words were broadcast across galactic communication networks and translated into every known language as he explained that humans were exactly what they appeared to be and had never pretended to be anything else. He reminded the galaxy that humanity had answered calls for help and provided protection when peaceful beings discovered that good intentions were not enough to guarantee survival. The psychological impact of human military success spread beyond the species that had directly encountered human forces as stories and recordings reached worlds that had never seen humans, but now knew they existed. Children of peaceful species began having nightmares about beings who laughed during combat and found joy in situations that should have caused terror and despair. Dr. Matt Turner's follow-up research revealed that human influence on galactic psychology was permanent and irreversible because humanity had introduced concepts that peaceful minds could not forget or ignore. The knowledge that predator species could achieve civilization created philosophical crises in cultures based on the assumption that intelligence naturally led to nonviolence. Captain Nick Robinson established formal diplomatic relations with The Kethran, a warrior poet species that had remained neutral during the Confederation crisis. The Kethran were the only known species that understood human nature, because they had also evolved from predators, though they had chosen philosophy over warfare as their path to enlightenment. The Kethran ambassador Thorak explained to Nick that most galactic species feared humans because humanity represented proof that their peaceful civilization was not the natural result of intelligence, but simply one possible outcome among many. Humans showed that successful societies could be built on controlled aggression and competitive cooperation instead of harmony and consensus. 5 years after expulsion from the Confederation, humanity had established the colonial union with settlements on 47 worlds that other species considered uninhabitable. Human expansion proceeded at rates that amazed neutral observers and terrified former enemies who realized that humanity could colonize the galaxy without anyone's permission or cooperation. The Vorthak delegation requested private meetings with human representatives to discuss possible reconciliation between humanity and selected Confederation species. Sexthera admitted that some aliens had begun to understand that fearing humanity was less dangerous than being unprotected when new threats emerged from unexplored space. Orbital sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic rim that analysis suggested were far more dangerous than the Devourers had ever been. The new threat appeared to be actively hostile rather than merely consuming, and showed signs of intelligence that could adapt to any defensive strategy the peaceful species might develop. Nick Robinson received formal requests from 6 Confederation species asking for human protection against the approaching menace. The aliens offered trade agreements and territorial concessions in exchange for human military assistance, but their messages carried undertones of desperation that suggested they understood how completely their situation had changed. The galaxy had learned to live with its nightmare and discovered that some nightmares were more dangerous than others. Humanity had found its place among the stars as the species other beings called when darkness came hunting, and peaceful solutions were not enough to guarantee survival. The universe was vast and full of threats that did not care about the difference between predator and prey, but only humans seemed ready to meet those threats with laughter and songs of war. The new threat arrived exactly as the sensors had predicted, but proved to be far worse than anyone had imagined when the first worlds went dark, without sending distress signals or showing signs of battle. Captain Nick Robinson studied the reconnaissance reports while preparing humanity's response to requests for protection from species that had voted to expel humans from galactic civilization just 5 years earlier. The entities called themselves the Harvesters, and they consumed not just matter and energy like the Devourers had done, but also information and consciousness itself. Entire populations vanished, leaving behind empty cities and silent communication. Networks as if billions of beings had simply ceased to exist in the space between one moment and the next. Ambassador Julie Roberts found herself negotiating with the same alien representatives who had demanded human withdrawal from Confederation space. The irony was not lost on anyone, as species that had feared human violence now begged for human protection against something that made humanity look peaceful by comparison. Julie listened to their desperate offers while wondering if the galaxy deserved the help it was asking for. The Vorthak delegation arrived at human space led by Zexthera, who had aged visibly since their first meeting decades earlier. The crystalline being's light patterns showed stress fractures that spoke of psychological damage from contemplating threats that peaceful minds were not designed to process. Zexthera requested private meetings with human leaders to discuss terms for renewed cooperation. Colonel Ashley Green received command of the Joint Defense Force that combined human military units with alien technology and resources. The arrangement required careful diplomacy because many alien species still feared human methods almost as much as they feared the Harvester threat. Ashley found herself teaching warfare to beings who had spent generations believing that violence was a primitive solution to complex problems. The first engagement with Harvester forces revealed why the aliens needed human assistance when Confederation fleets engaged the enemy using traditional tactics and simply disappeared without trace or explanation. The peaceful species had no experience fighting opponents who could manipulate reality itself and turn defensive positions into traps that consumed both ships and crews. Ashley's human forces approached the Harvesters with strategies based on chaos theory, and unpredictable behavior that made them harder targets for entities that seemed to predict conventional military responses. The humans used random movement patterns and illogical tactical decisions that confused opponents who relied on mathematical models to anticipate enemy actions. Lieutenant Ben Parker led the first successful boarding action against a harvester vessel by using techniques that violated every known principle of space combat. His Marines approached through debris fields while singing battle songs and making so much noise that stealth became impossible. The apparent stupidity of the human approach actually worked because the harvesters had never encountered opponents who deliberately announced their presence. The boarding teams discovered that harvesters fed on fear and despair and predictable emotional responses that they could process and consume like other forms of energy. Human psychology proved to be toxic to the entities because humans produced emotional patterns under stress that the harvesters could not digest or understand. Human laughter during combat actually caused physical damage to harvester information processing systems. Dr. Claire Thompson's research revealed that human brain chemistry during warfare produced compounds that acted like poison to consciousness-based entities. The aliens had unknowingly brought humanity the perfect biological weapon against opponents who consumed minds and souls. Human soldiers became walking toxin dispensers whose very presence could drive harvesters away from populated areas. Captain Scott Evans established the first joint human-alien colony on Kepler Prime, where both species worked together to build defenses against harvester incursions. The project succeeded because humans provided military protection, while aliens contributed technology and resources. The cooperation required both species to accept aspects of each other's nature that had previously caused fear and misunderstanding. The Kethran warrior poets joined the alliance as philosophical advisors who helped other species understand that accepting human nature did not require abandoning their own values. Thorak explained that humans could be controlled through honor and loyalty rather than fear, and that most human aggression was actually protective behavior directed at external threats. Major Susan Kelly trained mixed units of humans and aliens in urban warfare techniques that proved effective against harvesters who had difficulty processing the chaotic information patterns generated by combined species tactics. The training sessions became cultural exchanges where peaceful beings learned about controlled violence, while humans learned about cooperation without dominance. The liberation of Harmony Prime became a symbol of successful human-alien cooperation, when joint forces drove harvester entities away from the planet using tactics that combined human aggression with alien technology. The operation succeeded because both species contributed their strengths while covering each other's weaknesses in ways that multiplied their combined effectiveness. Ambassador Greg Campbell negotiated the formal alliance between humanity and 7 Confederation species that created the first truly integrated galactic defense force. The agreement acknowledged that humans were different from other species, but defined those differences as advantages rather than threats to be contained or eliminated. The Harvester War lasted 3 years and ended with complete victory for the Allied forces when the last enemy stronghold fell to combined human-alien assault teams. The success came at a cost measured in destroyed worlds and billions of casualties, but the galaxy survived because humans had been willing to fight, and aliens had been willing to accept human methods as necessary evils. Nick Robinson oversaw the establishment of permanent human-alien joint colonies on frontier worlds, where both species could work together while maintaining their distinct cultures and values. The colonies became models for cooperation that proved different species could benefit from each other's strengths without losing their own identities. The post-war galaxy settled into new patterns of interaction, where humans served as protectors and allies rather than members or subjects of alien civilization. Most species maintained careful distance from human settlements but appreciated knowing that humanity existed as insurance against future threats from the unknown regions of space. Zexthara visited Nick's colony 5 years after the Harvester defeat and admitted that the Vorthak had finally understood why the universe had produced species like humanity. The galaxy needed predators because the darkness between stars contained things that peaceful beings could never face alone. Zexthara's people had learned to be grateful for nightmares that protected them from worse things hiding in the cosmic night. The human children growing up in joint colonies played games with alien children that combined human competitive instincts with alien cooperative values. The mixed culture that emerged was neither fully human nor fully alien, but something new that might be better adapted to survive in a universe that seemed designed to test the limits of what intelligence could achieve. Human exploration fleets pushed deeper into uncharted space accompanied by alien science vessels that could analyze and understand phenomena that human instruments could not detect. The partnerships were based on mutual respect rather than fear, as both species learned that different types of intelligence could solve different types of problems. The galaxy had accepted its nightmare and discovered that nightmares could also be guardians when darkness came hunting among the stars. Humanity had found its purpose as the species that other beings called, when impossible odds required impossible solutions, and the survival of civilization depended on beings who could laugh in the face of extinction. The universe remained vast and dangerous and full of threats that peaceful species could not face alone. But now the galaxy had protectors who specialized in meeting impossible challenges with creativity and courage, and songs of victory that echoed across the void between worlds where anything might be waiting to test the strength of those who dared to claim the stars as home.